story kicks off with Mary welcoming her parents back home. They tease her, asking if she was lonely while they were gone. Mary proudly says no because her friend Rose kept her company. Then, the parents dropped a bomb. They introduce her new sibling, the kid they'll probably love more from now on. Mary is thrilled to have a baby brother, Cheyenne. Cheyenne eventually wakes up, drooling like a champ to meet his sister. Mary plants a kiss on his cheek, and the baby immediately looks like he's reconsidering his entire life. Fast forward a few years, and Mary is celebrating yet another victory over her brother in some physical game. Cheyenne, however, would rather be playing Call of Duty because, let's face it, he's not catching up to Mary's energy anytime soon. When their father Gawain comes home, Mary's excitement levels go through the roof. Cheyenne, meanwhile, is still amazed by how his sister never runs out of steam. Gawain pretends to enjoy Mary's hyperactiveness, while she brags about everyone calling her bright as the sun, thanks to her golden hair. Gawain is proud of his golden child, but Cheyenne sarcastically quips that Mary is also the most dependable, stealing her thunder for a second. Mary loves the praise but knows Cheyenne is the real MVP. He's the one helping their mom, not wetting the bed anymore, unlike her, and sometimes acting like a full-blown adult. She brushes it off but secretly takes comfort in knowing Cheyenne's embarrassing secret. When no one's watching, he likes to pretend he's a badass adventurer. One night, Cheyenne decides to ask their dad the big question: do monsters exist? Gawain, not one to sugarcoat, says, "Yup, they're real." He goes on to warn his kids to never leave the property because monsters attack people on sight. If they ever see one, they should run screaming for help like their lives depend on it. To lighten the mood, Gawain mentions that fairies exist too. He's even seen a few himself, though they're incredibly rare. Spirits? Not so sure, but fairies? Absolutely. Feeling bold, Cheyenne asks another question: what about magic? Gawain looks at him like he just asked for a unicorn. Magic? Nope, doesn't exist. He's never even heard of it. He admits there are things he doesn't know, but magic isn't one of them. Suspicious, Gawain asks where Cheyenne even heard about magic, fairies, and spirits. The kid clams up, saying he's fine, though Mary notices he looks upset. After that, Cheyenne never says the word magic again. 3 years later, Mary is training hard as usual. Cheyenne wonders why she's so dedicated, and her answer is simple: she's the big sister. If monsters or bad guys show up, she wants to be ready to fight them off, while Cheyenne runs for his life. Cheyenne, the family bookworm, is stunned that she's doing all this for him. Mary doesn't mind. She's naturally good at fighting, even if she's not the sharpest tool in the shed. She tells Cheyenne not to stress about it. A little later, Mary is training by the lake when her friend Rose shows up. Rose asks how she doesn't get bored of all the constant training. Mary tells her to stop whining and spar with her instead. Rose, exhausted from helping her grandpa all day, says no. She also asks why Mary doesn't spar with Cheyenne. Mary explains that her brother is too busy, locked up in the house, buried in books as always. Mary reflects on how Cheyenne hasn't said the word magic since that day their dad crushed his dreams. Still, she's convinced all his obsessive studying is his way of searching for answers. While Mary is with her friend Rose, they notice a strange glow that leaves them both stunned. Later, Mary drags Cheyenne to the lake, claiming she's got something amazing to show him. Cheyenne, ever the rule follower, reminds her they're not supposed to wander too far. Mary brushes him off, promising it's safe and monster-free. She knows their mom will be furious, but she's certain it'll be worth the trouble. When they arrive, the glow appears again, and Cheyenne is blown away by the sight of glowing orbs floating near the water. Mary had shown the orbs to their parents before, but they couldn't see them. Cheyenne wonders if adults just can't see them, but Mary explains that even some kids couldn't. Everyone seems to see the orbs differently, and Mary, brilliant as ever, thinks it must be connected to magic. Cheyenne is stunned. She remembers the word, but Mary smugly reminds him she never forgets anything about her little brother. Cheyenne gets emotional, thanking her for showing him the orbs. Mary jokes that the lights must have cured his depression, and they enjoy the moment together. The next morning, their parents are baffled by how quickly the kids inhale their breakfast before dashing off to the lake again. Cheyenne's lack of athletic ability is immediately obvious as he struggles to breathe after their little jog. Once there, his inner nerd kicks in. He wants to investigate the orbs scientifically. He devises a plan to fill 3 buckets, one with sand and rocks, one with water plants, and one with fish. Mary, with her usual enthusiasm but zero understanding, agrees to help. They manage to fill the first 2 buckets but struggle to catch fish. Cheyenne doesn't mind, he's just happy to spend time with Mary. Mary, in her usual big sister fashion, says it's normal for siblings to be this close. Deep down though, she's just as excited as he is. She really wants to know if magic exists. Eventually they catch a fish, but Cheyenne is disappointed to find it's just a common male trout. Isabel says that the trout may be magical at first. At this moment, Rose shows up and Mary introduces her brother. Rose introduces herself dramatically, but Mary quickly tells Cheyenne not to be fooled. Rose isn't as fancy as she pretends to be. The 3 of them discuss the orbs, but despite their efforts, the buckets don't produce any orbs, leading Cheyenne to conclude that the orbs must be coming from a living creature in the lake. Determined to find the source, Cheyenne decides to wade into the water. Mary, ever protective, joins him. Cheyenne touches one of the orbs, finding it warm and harmless. The water is too murky to see much, but he's certain the orbs are coming from something alive that moves around. Later, Cheyenne thanks Mary for helping him. She tells him he doesn't need to thank family so much, but he insists, and she lets it slide. Just then, Rose arrives, holding a female trout. She explains that male trout are common, but females stay deep underwater. They put the female trout in the bucket with the male, and suddenly, orbs start appearing. Cheyenne realizes the orbs are part of a mating ritual. Rose explains that it's like the fish are getting married to start a family. Mary, being Mary, thinks it's just like how she and Cheyenne are family. Cheyenne quickly corrects her, putting an end to that weird comparison. The next day, Mary casually mentions getting scolded by their mom for saying she wanted to marry Cheyenne. She admits she's scared they won't always be together, but Cheyenne reassures her they will. He promises to do whatever it takes, and Mary gets teary-eyed. Then, something wild happens. Cheyenne starts glowing. He realizes it might be magical energy and figures the orbs must have imprinted something inside him. Mary, embarrassed and confused, wonders what it all means. Cheyenne, on the other hand, is laser-focused. He declares that magic might not exist yet, but that's only because it hasn't been invented. He's ready to change that. In a shocking twist, we learn Cheyenne was reincarnated into this world. Fueled by his glowing discovery, he vows to create magic and make it a reality. We are taken back to modern-day Japan, where a guy is counting down to midnight on his 30th birthday. He's hyped because, according to some goofy legend, if you're a virgin at 30, you get magical powers. So naturally, he tries to summon a fireball. Nothing. Lightning spell? Nada. Frustrated, he lies on his back, rethinks his life, and then decides to go big. He whips out a little magic book and tries to summon some creature of light and darkness. Yeah, that fails too. Feeling like a clown, he accepts that magic isn't real, and staying a virgin for 3 decades was just a tragic waste. But life isn't done with him yet. He suddenly has a heart attack, clutching his magic book, and mutters, "I don't want to die," before everything goes dark. Next thing we know, he's reborn in a new world as a guy named Cheyenne. Reflecting on his old life, he realizes his only spark of joy came from that wizard dream, which, spoiler alert, was a bust. In his new life, he spends 3 years chasing magic like it owes him money. He researches, asks questions, and experiments like a mad scientist, but when he asked his dad about spells, the man had no idea what he was talking about. Ouch. One day, a strange energy at a lake gives him hope, but still, no spells work. Now he's stuck in a constant cycle of doubt, lying in bed, questioning everything. Enter his sister, Marie, who barges in without knocking. Annoyed, he tells her to knock next time. She claps back, asking if he's hiding something. He almost gives a cheeky answer but drops it, asking her to sit instead. Then Cheyenne stares at her like she's an alien, making her ask what's wrong. Out of nowhere, he says, "Marie, I love you." Boom! Magic energy explodes around him. Turns out, confessing love might be his secret to unlocking magic. He's thrilled but also horrified because, seriously? Does he have to confess every time he wants to cast a spell? That's awkward. Marie, of course, is furious. She thinks he's using her for magic experiments. Cheyenne insists his feelings are real, and just like that, she melts. She forgives him and even asks about his magical discovery. Cheyenne, meanwhile, is feeling smug. He might finally crack this magic thing, even if it means becoming a walking romance novel. Cheyenne tells Marie he thinks magic flows out of him when he taps into strong emotions. But it's not just about saying I love you. Marie gets all flustered, asking if he's about to confess his love again, even saying she needs to brace herself. But he clears it up, disappointing her with his serious tone. Cheyenne sits alone, thinking about how confessing his feelings made him super aware of them, almost like hugging his own emotions. He figures magic might come from other feelings too, like joy, excitement, or hope, so he focuses on happy thoughts and manages to release some magic. Sure, it's just a little glow, but hey, it's proof magic exists. That's a massive win in his book. Cheyenne starts feeling like a scientist, comparing magic to electric eels. Just like eels have special organs to zap stuff, humans here might have a magic organ that helps them create and control magical energy. Feeling pretty smart, he names this phenomenon the magically charged state. Marie is thrilled to see her brother this excited, probably for the first time ever. Over the next month, Cheyenne learns some quirks about magic. It's tricky to stay in the magically charged state. It drains you fast, and people without magic can't even see it. Still, those little discoveries keep him going. But there's one problem. He can't make a single light orb like the ones he saw at the lake. He jokes that he's basically a magical flashlight with no batteries. He doesn't give up. Remembering the glowing trout from the lake, he tries to focus magic into his hand. It's tough. The energy flow feels like a rogue garden hose. He finally figures out a trick. He convinces himself he'd be really happy if magic flowed into his hand. It works. His hand starts glowing, and Cheyenne feels like a superhero. Naturally, he punches a wall to test his new power, only to break his own hand. So much for being unstoppable. Still, he's hyped. He names his new move Magical Grouping and calls the magic Gathered Magic. Feeling like a genius, he's ready to keep experimenting. The next day, Cheyenne shows up for sword training with his dad, Marie, and Rose. He's already exhausted from all the magic stuff, but his dad doesn't care. He tells them to take training seriously because even wooden swords can be dangerous. Cheyenne, being Cheyenne, raises his hand like he's in class and declares he has zero interest in sword fighting. He argues that it's pointless since he doesn't plan on fighting anyone. His dad, being the wise old warrior, explains that swords aren't just for picking fights. They're for defending yourself against monsters. Rose eagerly adds that she asked to learn swordsmanship to protect herself. Marie, ever the supportive sibling, gives Cheyenne a pep talk, convincing him to give it a go. Cheyenne agrees, but secretly wishes he was back home, experimenting with magic. Training begins, and Cheyenne, bless his heart, swings a sword like he's trying to swat a fly. Meanwhile, Rose turns out to have natural talent. Their dad is so impressed, he says she could become a skilled swordswoman one day if she sticks with it. Then it's Marie's turn, and she steps up with the confidence of someone about to ace a test. Cheyenne, on the other hand, watches nervously, bracing for disaster. Marie charges at their dad with surprising speed, faking a frontal attack to make him block before pivoting to strike from below. It's a clever move, but dad is a seasoned pro. He dodges and gently taps her on the head with his sword to end the duel. He praises her creativity, but points out that her movements are too wide. Still, he says, she'll be a force to be reckoned with in the future. Marie lights up like a kid who just got a gold star at school. With sword training done, Cheyenne bolts back to his true love, magic. He's gotten pretty good at holding on to magical energy and can now manage it several times a day, but his progress has slowed. Frustrated, he decides it's time to rethink his approach. While he's brainstorming, his dad pops in and invites him on a trip to Historia. Cheyenne perks up, thinking it might be a chance for adventure. The family heads to Historia, and Cheyenne explains it's a bustling city in their region. When they arrive, Dad lays out the plan. Finish shopping, visit the blacksmith, and head home. He warns Cheyenne and Marie to stay close so they don't get lost, much to Cheyenne's annoyance. He realizes he won't have time to explore or hunt for magic clues. He resigns himself to sticking with the family for now, but promises himself he'll come back to Historia when he's older and do some real exploring. At one point, while their parents are busy shopping, Marie suddenly giggles. Cheyenne, curious, asks why, but she brushes it off, saying she's just being herself. Eventually, they head to the blacksmith. The blacksmith, a cheerful guy named Glass, greets their dad and mentions a special sword he's crafted for Marie's birthday. Marie freezes, surprised, as Glass presents her with a beautifully made sword that's just her size. When she unsheaths it, her face lights up with pure joy, and she can't stop smiling. On the ride home, Marie feels a little guilty that Cheyenne didn't get anything, but he shrugs it off, reminding her it's her birthday, not his, and he doesn't really want a sword anyway. But then something catches his eye. A shop with a sign that reads, Fairy Cellar. Intrigued, he asks his dad about it. Gawain, clearly uncomfortable, brushes off the question and tells Cheyenne it's nothing he needs to worry about. Cheyenne, sensing there's more to it, files the shop's name away in his mind. Something tells him it's a place he'll need to check out someday. The late afternoon sun fell behind dark clouds as a man walked home, his bundle of wood growing heavier. What began as a slight drizzle ended a deluge. He picked up his pace, and a boy appeared out of nowhere, tripping on his own feet and tumbling at the man's feet. Sopping and desperate, the boy leapt up, flailing his arms like he was about to take off. Ultimately, he managed to wheeze out a warning. People were being abducted by goblins. At home, Cheyenne was practicing magic, or at least attempting to. He held out his right hand, glowing like a cheap flashlight. Small victories, of course, but really nothing to boast about. Marie, who was gazing at her brother with a mixture of concern and pity, realized he wasn't exactly over the moon. She sensed the warmth of his spell in the back of her mind, testament to the fact that he was somehow getting better at controlling it. But Cheyenne? He was restless. He was hoping to do something cool, like making his socks float. But all he had now was luminescent light, without purpose. He dreamed of magic that might change the world, not a nightlight in his hand. While Cheyenne's thoughts wandered, he remembered fairies and people who seemed to treat them like they were exotic pets, sold in cages at the market. His dad had hated when Cheyenne took an interest in the train station fairy in the town, called it dangerous. Suddenly, the sound of the front door crashing open interrupted Cheyenne's musings. Gawain, their father, strode in, his expression grim. He quickly armed the men in the house, delivering dire news. Goblins were nearby, and they posed a real threat. The urgency in his voice left no room for doubt. This was no ordinary night. Upstairs, the rest of the family worked together to fortify the second floor, barricading the door with furniture. The house transformed into a stronghold as the storm raged outside. Cheyenne felt a swirl of emotions, anxious yet curious. Goblins were often dismissed as weak and troublesome, but he suspected they were more dangerous than people believed. Outside the house, a goblin leaped effortlessly over the wall and crept toward the structure. It moved with predatory precision, peering through the boarded-up windows on the first floor. Finding no way in, it turned to the front door, scratching it repeatedly. The sound echoed upstairs, where Cheyenne and the others were hiding. Though Marie hoped it was their father, Cheyenne knew better. The scratching grew louder, morphing into a terrifying noise that gripped everyone with fear. Just as the tension reached its peak, the sound stopped. The silence was short-lived, however, as the unmistakable shatter of glass filled the air. The goblin had found its way inside. Marie's voice broke in nervous chatter, but Cheyenne motioned for silence, understanding the gravity of the situation. The goblin's footsteps thudded on the stairs, each step amplifying the dread in the room. Those hiding inside tried desperately to stifle their breathing, clinging to the hope of remaining unnoticed. Relief came briefly as the goblin passed their door, but a sudden clap of thunder startled a mother and her child. Their frightened screams betrayed their location, and the goblin turned its attention to the barricaded door. Within moments, it breached the room. The grotesque creature stood before the group, reveling in their fear. Cheyenne's mother stepped forward, begging for mercy for the children. But as she stumbled and fell, the goblin let out a cruel laugh, relishing its dominance. It was clear the creature understood its power over them. Marie, refusing to cower, drew her sword and pointed it at the goblin, her determination unwavering. Cheyenne silently pleaded with her to retreat, but Marie remained resolute, remembering her promise to protect her brother. The goblin, unimpressed, swatted the sword from her hand and embedded it into the wall. Advancing on the girl, it swung its claws, but their mother shielded Marie, taking the full brunt of the attack. Cheyenne swiped at her with the leather cloth across her back. She crumpled to the floor, gravely injured. Marie screamed in despair, but the goblin pressed on, ready to finish them. Driven by instinct and desperation, Cheyenne lunged at the creature, grabbing its arm. He knew he couldn't overpower it physically, but something within him ignited. His body began to emit magical energy, a force he struggled to control but refused to stop gathering. To the others, who couldn't see the energy, the scene was inexplicable. Yet the goblin reacted violently, recoiling as its arm burned from the unseen magic. It flung Cheyenne against the wall, but the boy, now fully focused, channeled his power once more. Summoning all his strength, he directed the magical energy at the goblin's head. The creature thrashed wildly before collapsing. Cheyenne, trembling, stared at the motionless goblin. His hand throbbed with a painful burn from the magic, and his heart raced with the realization of what he had done. Around him, the villagers looked on in shock. Rose, however, assured him that his actions had saved them all, but the victory was bittersweet. Emma, his mother, lay pale and bloodied, her life slipping away. Cheyenne focused on her, knowing that stopping the bleeding was his only chance to save her. Realizing he couldn't treat her on the ground, he called for help. With the assistance of the other women, Emma was moved to a bed. Cheyenne urgently asked if anyone had medical or herbal knowledge, but in the small village, no one possessed such skills. Recalling lessons from his past life, he remembered how injuries were treated in the movies and shows he had seen. The first step was stitching the wound. Determined to act, he asked if anyone could sew. A young woman hesitantly raised her hand, and he instructed her to retrieve sewing supplies from Emma's room, while others gathered strong spirits and clean cloth. The grim task of moving the goblin's corpse to the corridor fell to the remaining villagers. Before joining them, a boy slightly younger than Cheyenne grasped his hand and thanked him, his gratitude giving Cheyenne a renewed sense of purpose. Soon, all the materials were assembled. Cheyenne asked the seamstress her name, and she introduced herself as Leah. Cutting away his mother's clothing to examine the injury, Cheyenne saw that the wound, while severe, wasn't as deep as he feared. His main concern was whether the goblin's claws carried poison, but he quickly pushed the thought aside. There was no time for doubt. He asked Leah to begin stitching the wound, but her hesitation revealed an unsettling truth. Suctioning wounds was unfamiliar in this world. Cheyenne explained the necessity of closing the wound, emphasizing the dangers of leaving it exposed. Leah struggled with the idea, fearing she would hurt Emma more, but Cheyenne's urgency made her realize there was no alternative. Overcoming her fear, she began the delicate process with trembling hands. Hours later, Emma was lying in bed, her breathing steady, and her condition stabilized. Cheyenne expressed his heartfelt gratitude to Leah for her effort. Relief swept through the house, and Marie, unable to hold back her emotions, embraced her brother, her tears flowing freely. Cheyenne hugged her in return, his own eyes welling up. Their moment was interrupted by the sound of the men returning from the forest. They reported finding the goblin lair and eliminating 2 of the creatures, but traces of others suggested the threat wasn't entirely gone. For now, though, the village had peace. A doctor was summoned to examine Emma's condition. After a thorough check, he confirmed that the wounds, while deep, hadn't damaged any vital organs. The stitching was commendable and played a significant role in her recovery. With proper rest and nutrition, Emma would heal completely. Later, Marie confided in Emma, blaming herself for what had happened. Emma took her daughter's hand, reassuring her that she had been brave and should be proud of her actions. Meanwhile, Gawain spoke privately with Cheyenne, having heard of his son's efforts to save Emma. He marveled at the boy's resourcefulness, though he couldn't fathom how a child could possess such knowledge. Cheyenne, inwardly aware of his past life as a 30-year-old Japanese man, simply claimed he had done his best. Gawain pressed him about the goblin encounter and the strange burn mark left on the creature. When Cheyenne hesitated, his father deduced that magic was involved. Gawain remarked on Cheyenne's mature demeanor and frequent interest in magic, which had raised his suspicions. Realizing there was no hiding the truth, Cheyenne asked for his father's trust. Gawain, though conflicted, warned him of the dangers associated with magic. He forbade further study, citing the risks it posed. Marie, however, defended her brother, insisting that his knowledge of magic had saved their family. Despite his father's opposition, Cheyenne stood firm. Magic was his passion, and he couldn't abandon it. Gawain, seeing his son's unwavering resolve, relented under one condition: Cheyenne's studies would be closely monitored. Encouraging his son to remain steadfast in his pursuit, Gawain assured him of his support, even if the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. In some ways, Gawain awakened at Josiah the same way an apprenticeship will. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. The very next day, Gawain lights a fire at his son's request. His son, Cheyenne, gathers mana in his hand and extends it toward the fire, causing an explosion and fire to spark on his hand. Gawain quickly rushes to throw water on him, warning that this experiment is way too dangerous. Meanwhile, Cheyenne explains that he wanted to see what would happen if magic met high-level magical energy. He learned something important after facing a goblin, but he also wanted to test how magic reacts with natural phenomena. What he discovered was that the flames turned blue and reacted with the magic cluster. Gawain, who couldn't see the magical energy, trusts his son's judgment and keeps an eye on him. Meanwhile, Marie feels left out, but Cheyenne comforts her, saying that if it weren't for her, he would have never discovered his own magical energy. Marie feels proud, realizing her importance in the research. Cheyenne starts to obsess over the fire magic and dreams of casting a fireball. His father starts to see a side of his son he didn't know existed. Cheyenne reflects on how, even in tough times, something good can come from it. That day marked the beginning of his true love for magic and his real research into it. With his dad's help, he kept trying the experiment with the fire, despite the flames constantly burning his hand, with Gawain always ready to put them out. As Cheyenne continues, he notices the temperature stays the same, the smoke is gray, and the flames are blue. He asks his dad to increase the fire level. In the next attempt, he slightly reduces the magic's intensity and focuses hard until he's exhausted. Gawain suggests taking a break, so they go to prepare a hot drink when Rose shows up, curious about the experiment. Cheyenne promises to explain later, as he can't do it without his dad's support. Rose comments that it's nice to see Gawain supporting his son. Cheyenne also thanks Rose for being so kind to him after he defeated the goblin, making him feel happy. Rose says she should be the one thanking him, as Cheyenne saved everyone. Rose then asks about Marie, since the girl is always by Cheyenne's side. They find Marie training intensely with a wooden sword. Rose thinks it's because of the goblin attack, but says Cheyenne should always be there for his sister, as she surely expects that from him. Meanwhile, Marie is lost in thoughts about the goblin attack, but shakes her head to focus on her training. Later, Cheyenne analyzes his magic progress. The more magic gathered, the bigger the flame. The more magic used, the stronger the fire. He discovers that heat sources can also ignite mana, even if they're not fire. If you touch the magically charged fire, it burns your hand, staying red. And even if you wear gloves, the magic still works, meaning you'll burn your hand anyway if you touch the fire. After gathering all the info, Cheyenne admits that so far, everything seems too dangerous and pointless. Gawain agrees, saying controlling fire is still far out of reach. Cheyenne jokes it would be awesome if he could just keep a magic orb floating like the traps do. Marie overhears and easily does it herself. Cheyenne nearly loses his mind, while Marie explains she just copied what Cheyenne said. Rose joins in, showing she can do it too, and the girls team up to give Cheyenne tips on how to do the same. But Cheyenne finally figures out that he doesn't need to release all the magic at once, and successfully gets the orb to float in the air. Later, he practices again, forgetting the fire and launching a magic orb that explodes in the sky, impressing the crowd. Cheyenne feels proud, though he knows it's not anything big yet, but it's proof his dream magic can actually. A month after the goblin attack, the season changes and Cheyenne keeps pushing himself. He walks through the back of the house, thinking he needs to control magic better, but every time he tries to give it an order, his mana depletes, suggesting there's something he's still missing. As he walks to the front of the house, he sees Marie practicing with her sword. She drops it, her hand injured. Gawain tells her to stop, but Marie insists on continuing, quoting their dad's advice about getting stronger through practice. Cheyenne agrees, but when she ignores him, he calls her out. Realizing she pushed herself too hard, Marie walks away, head down. Cheyenne feels bad, and Gawain reassures him she's just a bit stressed. Later, during tea, Cheyenne talks about his new focus, lightning magic. He's hit a wall with fire magic, so he's curious if any animal or plant can create electricity. His dad mentions hearing from Grast about a powerful lightning-like phenomenon, which leads them to head to Istria. Cheyenne tries to convince Marie to join, but she's too busy and stays behind, pretending everything's fine, though she's sad once alone. In Istria, Cheyenne and Gawain meet Grast, who thinks they're talking about lightning ore. It's common but hard to transport because it's dangerous. Cheyenne wonders if the ore is a mineral that discharges electricity. He also asks Grast about trees with white, sticky sap, wishing they had rubber trees for insulation, but Grast says no. Cheyenne then asks about mica, a mineral used for electrical insulation. Grast shows him a crystal called paper crystal, which Cheyenne realizes might work similarly to mica, but he's unsure how to use it. Grast is curious what Cheyenne's planning, but Gawain says his son often shows wisdom beyond his years. Cheyenne asks for a bigger piece of the crystal, and Grast says it'll cost 4,000 Rome, a lot of money for a family. Grast jokes about Gawain being a soft dad, and they head home with the lightning ore. Emma is there, curious about Cheyenne's experiments, and asks about Marie, who's still training alone. Cheyenne gathered mana in his hand and launched a magical orb at the ore, causing it to explode. Gawain tried to console his son, reminding him that he'd failed a lot before mastering fire magic. But Cheyenne wasn't upset. In fact, he started laughing like a maniac, calling the experiment a success. When the magical orb approached the lightning ore, it didn't catch fire. Instead, it sparked intensely, showing that mana could do more than just start fires. It could mimic and amplify other phenomena. Back in his room, Cheyenne thought about how to convert magic into electricity without it being repelled, like with the orb earlier. He tried again, commanding a floating orb to turn into an electrical source, but it vanished. That's when he realized he didn't need to release magic in a circular shape. He then made other magical sources in different forms. Excited to share his discovery, Cheyenne ran to Marie's room, but she wasn't there. Instead, he found her bandages on the bed. Cheyenne rushed through the forest to find her. Near the river, he saw her practicing with a wooden sword, but she broke it against a tree. Remembering Rose's advice to always be there for his sister, Cheyenne apologized for trying to stop her from training, realizing he was wrong, especially since she always encouraged him to practice magic. Marie assured him it wasn't a big deal, but admitted she'd wondered why her brother wasn't there. She told him it wasn't about him, but about her own feelings. She'd always been the eldest, the protector, and it hurt to see Cheyenne take that role, even if just for a moment. Marie confided that she felt weak after the goblin attack, especially since she was too scared to act and would have probably died without Cheyenne's help. She was angry with herself for not reacting the way she thought she could. Cheyenne asked if she hated him, but she quickly said no. She loved him. Yesterday, today, always. She hated herself for not being as strong as he was. Marie cried, feeling like she wasn't strong enough to protect anyone. Cheyenne, realizing how she felt, stepped closer and hugged her, apologizing for not noticing sooner. Marie also apologized for her actions. Cheyenne told her to always speak up when something was bothering her. As they hugged, a magical aura surrounded them both. Cheyenne reflected on how, whether you're a child or an adult, everyone just wants to survive. It was one of the things he learned after reincarnating in this new world. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next video. See you next time.
The next day, Rose stood nearby, watching with curiosity and a little confusion as Mary clung tightly to Cheyenne. Ever since their heartfelt conversation by the river, Mary hadn't left his side. It was like she couldn't bear to be away from him. Eventually, Cheyenne turned to her and gently asked if she could step back a little. Mary's face dropped. She asked why, sounding a little hurt. Cheyenne explained that he needed space to test his magic. Mary hesitated, then asked if she was getting in his way. He quickly reassured her that she wasn't, he just needed a bit more room. Even though she wasn't happy about it, Mary stepped aside. With some distance between them, Sion began his next magic experiment. He found out that he could shape his magical energy into any form he wanted. But there was a catch. When he spread it out too much, it became weaker and less effective. Realizing this, he changed his approach and focused on making the energy smaller and denser. When he sparked it, the condensed energy exploded with a powerful burst of magic. Both his father and Mary were stunned by the unexpected power. Even Sion was surprised. This was beyond what he had imagined. Excited by his discovery, he decided to name the new spell Flare. It was a big step forward in his magic. Feeling motivated, he turned his attention to the lightning stone, trying to interact with it. But nothing happened. His magic still wasn't strong enough to trigger any reaction. Frustrated but not discouraged, Sion decided to push his limits. He gathered a larger amount of energy and sent it straight into the lightning stone. This time, an explosion erupted, blasting him off his feet. Mary and Rose ran to him, their faces filled with panic. Sion, brushing off the dust, assured them he was fine. Mary, still shaken, said she had expected the lightning to shoot in the opposite direction, not bounce back at him. Sion explained that it was normal. Lightning tends to return to its source. Even though the experiment didn't go as planned, Sion could feel he was close to discovering something important. He wasn't sure what yet, but he knew magic had endless possibilities. He also realized that if he wanted to improve, he needed to think outside the box. As he reflected on everything so far, a thought crossed his mind. Had things been going too smoothly? It almost felt like this world had brought him here just to create magic. That doubt lingered in his mind. Just then, his father returned, bringing along his friend Glass. They sat at the table, but something felt off. Glass looked tense and worried. Breaking the silence, Sion's father turned to him and asked if he remembered how he had extracted the lightning ore. Sion nodded. Of course, he remembered. His father then pointed at Glass and explained that he had used Sion's method to extract lightning ore, something that was supposed to be impossible. Looking guilty, Glass confessed. He had taken the technique he learned from Sion and tried to turn it into a business. Without telling anyone, he had started smuggling the ore, hoping to make a fortune. Now he was here to admit his mistake. Glass was surprised when Sion stayed calm and said he didn't see a problem with what he had done. Still shocked by his reaction, Glass insisted that he had used Sion's idea for personal gain without permission. But Sion just shrugged it off, showing no signs of anger. At that point, Sion's father stepped in, saying the issue was bigger than just Glass feeling guilty about making money. He explained that when they checked Glass's warehouse, they found that the lightning stones were releasing huge amounts of energy uncontrollably, making them too dangerous to store. Glass went into more detail, saying that while people initially bought the stones, the sudden energy discharges caused sparks and even small explosions. Complaints started pouring in, and sales dropped fast. Now, the warehouse was full of unstable stones that no one wanted. Frustrated, Sion's father didn't know what to do next. Desperate, Glass turned to Sion and begged him to find a way to make the stones safe and useful. If he couldn't fix the problem within 3 days, he would have to refund all his customers, which would bankrupt him and cost him everything. Holding on to hope, Glass called Sion the genius, convinced he could figure something out. Sion's father looked at his friend with sympathy, but Sion just stood there, lost in thought. Glass, growing more nervous by the second, feared Sion might refuse to help. But after a moment, Sion finally agreed to try. Glass was relieved, but Sion quickly warned him not to get his hopes up. There was no guarantee he'd succeed. Then, stepping up to the lightning stones, Sion studied them carefully before asking why they were arranged in that way. Glass explained that when the stones were placed too close together, energy would suddenly discharge. To prove his point, he moved 2 stones near each other. Instantly, a sharp spark shot out between them. Sion observed closely, thinking through the possibilities. Then Glass introduced a stone that had been made by melting lightning ore together. Sion asked if this melted stone would also spark when placed near another. Glass told him to test it. Sion pressed 2 of the melted stones together. Nothing happened. That was it. Sion realized that melting the ore changed its properties. He asked Glass at what point the energy stopped discharging. Glass explained that the stones still held some energy when they were broken, but it completely disappeared after melting. Understanding the process now, Sion nodded. He took out his lighter and asked his father if he could try something. Trusting his son, His father gave him the go-ahead. Sion then used his flare spell, summoning a small but controlled flame. Glass was stunned. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. But Sion didn't make a big deal out of it. He just told Glass to focus. Still, Glass couldn't ignore what had just happened. He demanded to know how Sion had created fire from his hand. Sion simply replied, "It's magic." Then, looking at his father, he silently asked for permission to explain more. His father nodded, showing that he trusted Glass. Glass, still trying to process everything, turned to Sion's father and asked if he had always known about Sion's magic. His father confirmed it. Shaking his head in disbelief, Glass struggled to wrap his mind around it. But after a moment, he admitted that seeing it for himself had changed his perspective. Now, he truly believed in magic. With a new idea in mind, Glass looked at Sion and wondered, if they used his magical fire to melt the lightning stone, would the result be different? Sion was super excited about the experiment. He wasn't sure if it would work, but he really wanted to find out. Glass agreed to test it, warning that it would take about an hour. He suggested they go for a walk, but Sion was too eager to leave. The others were just as curious, so they all stayed. After an hour of hard work, Glass finally finished reshaping the lightning stone. Everyone held their breath as he brought two of the stones together. Sparks flew. The magical fire had really changed the stone. Sion was thrilled, and the group cheered at their success. Feeling confident, Sion named the new material Iron Lightning and was sure it would be a hit. Excited, they got straight to work, making Iron Lightning panels, lamps, and magical lighters. They worked non-stop for 3 days, creating all sorts of new items. When they finally finished, the feeling was incredible. Sion's father was proud, and even Marie praised him. He had worried she might be jealous, but she was happy for him. Glass, amazed by Sion's ideas, thanked him and admitted he had no idea how Sion came up with such brilliant stuff. It seemed like Glass wanted to say something important, but before he could, Sion's father changed the subject. Glass apologized, but Sion couldn't shake the feeling that he was holding something back. Before leaving, Glass told Sion he'd always be there if he needed help. Marie, curious, asked what he meant, but Glass only smiled, hinting that he had an idea that could change everything for Sion. His words stayed in Sion's mind long after he left. As expected, the lightning lamps and magical lighters became an instant hit, selling out quickly and making Sion a lot of money. But he wasn't done experimenting yet. He wanted to take things even further. One day, he set up a simple test. He lit a candle with magical fire and covered it with a glass lid. Normal fire would go out without oxygen, but would magical fire? Marie guessed it would keep burning, while Rose thought it would go out. After a few moments, Sion lifted the lid. The magical flame was still there. Marie cheered, teasing Rose for being wrong, but Sion was more interested in what it meant. Magical fire didn't need oxygen to survive. That was a big discovery. When Rose asked what it meant, Sion explained that magical energy could change natural elements, making them immune to things like air. While this didn't have an obvious use yet, it proved that magical fire and regular fire were completely different. Excited, Sion wanted to test something else. He summoned a small magical flame and asked Marie to add just a little bit of her magic to it. The moment her energy touched the flame, it expanded suddenly, releasing a strong burst of energy that sent Marie stumbling backward. Panicked, Sion ran to her. Marie, still on the ground, reassured him she was fine, just startled. Then she gave him a suspicious look and asked if he had expected that to happen. Sion quickly shook his head. He had only thought the flame would grow stronger, not react so dramatically. Marie was confused. She had barely used any magic, so why did it cause such a big reaction? Sion thought hard. Something wasn't adding up. A small amount of magic shouldn't have caused such a powerful effect. He decided to test it again with a lightning stone. This time, nothing unusual happened. That's when it hit him. He finally understood. Rose, still confused, asked if magic wasn't the only factor. Sion nodded excitedly. It was magic, but there was something more to it. He explained that magical energy didn't just float on its own. It reacted with the air around it. He remembered feeling slight wind resistance when using lightning magic. Since magical fire burned without oxygen, it meant magical energy could amplify natural forces rather than just being a separate thing. Realizing how huge this was, Sion let out his usual goofy laugh. Mary and Rose, finally getting it, shared in his excitement. Then, Sion revealed something special. Glass had made him a pair of gloves from leather and paper crystal, designed to safely handle magical energy. Wearing the gloves, Sion tried another experiment. He created a small fire and controlled its energy, producing a steady and powerful flame. Then, he switched to lightning magic and fired a sharp, concentrated bolt of electricity. He stood tall, full of confidence, and declared that he had finally done it. His father, watching from a distance, was speechless. Mary ran up to him, eyes wide with excitement, calling it the most amazing thing she had ever seen. The emotions hit Sion all at once. He had worked so hard, and now it was paying off. Tears welled up in his eyes. Mary and Rose rushed to comfort him, while his parents and Glass watched with pride. They all knew Sion was something special. That night, when the house was quiet, Sion had a strange feeling. He overheard his parents and Glass talking in hushed voices. Curious, he moved closer to listen. Glass spoke first, saying that Sion's magic was incredible and could become something truly extraordinary. His father responded with a serious tone, saying Sion was smart enough not to reveal his abilities to just anyone. His mother agreed, but reminded them that he was still just a child. There was a long pause before his father sighed. He admitted that things were getting out of his control. Sion was too sharp. He wouldn't be able to stop him from chasing his discoveries. Then he said something that made Sion's heart stop. They had been entrusted with him. Sion's mind raced. Entrusted with me. Glass nodded solemnly and confirmed what Sion feared. It seemed Sion was adopted. The truth hit him like a thunderclap. Was he really not related to his family by blood? The next day, Sion spent his time practicing his aim, trying out a new magic technique he had just come up with the day before. Marie and Rose watched from the side, totally impressed by how fast he was improving. Rose pointed out that his accuracy had gotten way better. He could now hit long-distance targets with ease. Sion nodded, admitting he was getting the hang of it and thanking them for their support. Marie, always cheerful, grinned and reassured him that as his big sister, it was only natural for her to help out. That's when a random thought hit Sion out of nowhere, one that completely threw him off. He suddenly remembered something he'd heard before. He and Marie weren't actually blood. That changed everything. Technically, since they were just step-siblings, they could get married. The idea made his face heat up, and when Marie noticed him acting weird and asked if something was wrong, he quickly shook it off, wondering why on earth that thought even crossed his mind. Later that night, Sion couldn't stop thinking about it. His brain felt like it was overheating, so he decided to focus on something else: his magic. Determined to level up his skills, he started experimenting with a technique he called synergistic magic, which boosted magical energy by combining different elements. His test led to some pretty cool discoveries. Mixing synergistic magic with flare created twin flare, an insanely powerful version of flare. Combining it with bolt resulted in line volt, a stronger version of bolt. When flare's energy reacted with magic, it produced bomb flare. Adding an extra energy burst turned it into double bomb flare. But to his surprise, combining flare with flare, or bolt with bolt, didn't do anything special. The next day, Sion headed to the river, where Rose curiously asked what he was up to. Marie, already knowing how he operated, confidently guessed he was about to try another magic experiment. As expected, Sion attempted something new, channeling magic into the water. At first, nothing happened, leaving both Marie and Rose confused. He tried again, and this time a small magic orb briefly appeared in the water before disappearing. Sion had no idea what had just happened. Marie, just as puzzled, sighed and said she was thinking the same thing. Rose, eager for answers, pushed him to explain his thought process. Sion explained that from their past experiments, magic usually behaved like air when released. So, he was curious about how it would act in water. Marie, still doubtful, pointed out that it didn't look any different. Rose agreed. It didn't seem like anything had changed. But Sion wasn't convinced. He noticed that the magic floated and met some resistance, meaning something had to be different. Thinking it over, he realized that when magic moved from air to water or vice versa, nothing major happened. Unlike fire and lightning, water didn't seem to create strong magical reactions. Rose sighed, recognizing Sion's deep in thought expression. He was at it again. Marie just chuckled, used to him overthinking things. Determined to try something else, Sion focused his magic again. This time, tiny water droplets lifted for a moment before vanishing. Marie's eyes widened. She was sure the water had moved. Rose hesitated, unsure if it was real or just her imagination. Sion, however, was sure of it. Excitedly, he explained that by channeling magic into the water, he had actually managed to lift it. This meant magic could interact with water after all. Marie, realizing what this meant, excitedly called it a huge discovery. If magic could affect water, Sion wouldn't be limited to just fire and lightning. He might even be able to use water magic. Rose agreed, saying this opened up a lot of new possibilities for him. Sion nodded, understanding how important this was, but he also admitted that, for now, the effect was weak and not very useful. The best potential use, he thought, would be controlling the water in the air. Excited to try, he turned to Marie and Rose, asking them to watch closely. He focused hard, trying to gather water from the air around him, but nothing happened. Confused, he admitted he could only feel a slight dampness on his hand. Not exactly the big breakthrough he was hoping for. Marie and Rose, still struggling to understand what he was even trying to do, just looked at him, completely lost. Sion focused all his mana into a tiny sphere, and this time it turned completely into water. Marie got so excited that she grabbed him and started shaking him, demanding to know where the water came from. Sion tried to explain, but she was shaking him so much that he could barely get a word out. Rose quickly told Marie to calm down, finally giving Sion a chance to speak. He said he spread a thin layer of magic over a large area of air to collect water, which seemed to use less mana than pulling it directly from a river. That's probably why he managed to create water without using extra magical energy. Still hyped, Marie asked what he would name this new magic. Without thinking too much, Sion decided to call it Aqua. Later, after hearing his explanation, Marie and Rose tried it themselves and managed to recreate the spell. They were so amazed by the results that when the water bubble finally popped, soaking them completely, they just burst into laughter. Marie cheerfully waved Sion over, and as he watched her, he realized something. He had now developed 3 different elemental magics. Maybe he was reaching a new level of power. Later, while riding in a carriage with his parents, Marie and Rose, Sion thought about how it was probably time to refine his abilities even further. Hours later, Grass took the kids to the Adventurers Guild, explaining that they needed to register before taking on monster hunting missions. Sion thought that the only way to truly test his magic against real threats was by going on these dangerous missions. But Grass reminded them that they didn't have to decide right away. This was a serious step. Marie didn't want to keep running away from tough decisions. She wanted to become stronger as soon as possible to protect her family. Rose felt the same. There was no way she'd back down. Seeing their determination, Grass decided it was time to go inside and sort things out. Before they entered, Sion asked Grass to keep this secret from his father. Grass just chuckled and agreed. Inside, Grass approached the counter, introducing himself as a platinum rank adventurer and requesting to register the 3 kids. But before the process could continue, a familiar figure arrived. Gawain. Gawain wasn't exactly thrilled to find his kids at the Adventurers Guild. His face remained stern as he walked over, but instead of stopping them, he pulled out his adventurer's badge, a diamond rank one no less, and personally recommended them. The receptionist was so shocked that she almost screamed, drawing attention from everyone in the guild. A diamond rank adventurer was a rare sight, but Gawain remained completely unfazed, ignoring the stares. With their registration complete, he told the kids to pick a mission, because they'd have a serious talk about this later. After leaving the guild, the first thing they had to do was apologize to Gawain for going behind his back. Well, at least they tried. He had already figured out something was up. Marie had been avoiding eye contact with their parents, which was a dead giveaway. Eventually, Marie confessed and apologized. Gawain sighed, disappointed. But what surprised him more was that Sion had attempted something this reckless without telling his own father. Embarrassed, Sion had no excuse. Grast, however, stepped in, saying the kids had their reasons. Gawain shot him a look. Really? He found it ironic that Grast was giving him a moral lecture after all the questionable things he'd done in the past. That shut Grast up real quick. Still, Gawain was curious. Why were the kids so eager to take on these missions? Once they explained, he realized this wasn't just childish mischief. They actually had a goal in mind. Since they had chosen to seek out a trustworthy adult for guidance, Gawain acknowledged their responsibility. Even though he wasn't around, he knew they would be in safe hands. However, no matter how careful they were, the world was unpredictable. So, next time, he told them to talk to him first. It was always safer to have two high-ranking adventurers protecting them. Sion completely understood what his father meant. But before he could say anything, Gawain made it clear. He wasn't just giving them advice. He was joining them on their first mission. The kids' faces lit up with excitement. Hours later, deep in the forest where their mission took place, Grast stayed behind to protect the kids, while Gawain took the lead. A group of kobolds appeared, but they were no match for Gawain. With swift and precise sword strikes, he took them all down in seconds. The kids could only watch in awe, so this was the strength of a diamond rank adventurer. Grast remarked that Gawain was as monstrously strong as ever, while Cheyenne was stunned. His father was even more powerful than he had thought. Gawain then told the children it was their turn to fight the kobolds they were hunting, and they should be arriving any minute. Just as he said that, the kobolds appeared. Gawain explained that since they were weaker than goblins, they were the perfect opponents for the kids' first battle. Hearing the word goblin immediately triggered memories from Marie, but she quickly pulled herself together. The kobolds attacked, and Gawain ordered Marie and Rose to engage, while Cheyenne stayed in the rear since the enemies had no long-range attacks. He then launched a flame bomb, creating a huge explosion and taking out several monsters. But before he could react, a kobold charged at him. Marie rushed in and blocked the attack just in time. With his mana recovered, Cheyenne unleashed a lined ray while Marie and Rose continued fighting up close. Though exhausted, they eventually took down all the kobolds, except one. Before it could catch the girls off guard, Cheyenne swiftly used twin flames to finish it off. Marie admitted she only had the courage to fight because her brother was there, which gave her more confidence. Hearing this, Cheyenne realized that no matter their blood relation, Marianne would always think of him as family, and that was enough for him. Gawain praised their efforts, but then surprised them by announcing they would now raid the kobolds' den. The children were stunned. They hadn't expected to face so many monsters on their first adventure. Pushing through exhaustion, they fought fiercely inside the den. It was an intense battle, but in the end, victory was theirs. While Gawain and Grast collected loot, the kids sat down to rest. That's when Cheyenne noticed something unusual deeper inside. Curious, they ventured in and found a fairy trapped in a cage. Without hesitation, Cheyenne opened it, and the fairy flew free, mesmerizing them with its beauty. That night, Gawain returned home with his children. Emma immediately noticed their injuries, figured out what had happened, and whacked Gawain with a candlestick in front of them. She then turned to her sons, demanding an explanation. Cheyenne and Marie nervously admitted they had gone monster hunting, but Emma revealed Gawain had already told her beforehand. Confused, Cheyenne asked why his father still got hit. Emma explained that it wasn't normal for kids to come home covered in wounds, and Gawain had gone too far by exposing them to so many kobolds. As a mother, she didn't mind them doing what they wanted, as long as they didn't get hurt. That was all she asked. As long as they were safe, she was happy. She then hugged them and they apologized for leaving without telling her. Despite everything, there was no anger in her, just warmth and understanding. Finally, she invited them to take a bath. Later, as Marie and Rose chatted while bathing, Cheyenne sat outside the tub, lost in thought. Over and over, he told himself that they were a family. Remembering all their moments together, he had no doubts. Their bond wasn't by blood, but it was real. Magic existed in this world, but to him, this was the greatest miracle. He was truly happy. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching.